Thank you for joining us. We're going to get started. So today on Girl Scouts Connected, which is a partnership between Eastern South Carolina and Girl Scouts of South Carolina Mountains to Midlands, we are offering the Senior Badge Photographer. So this is part one of part two. So next week we'll have another session, which is going to help us almost complete the badge. Then there's one little step that you have to do after. So we're going to get started. My name is Lauren Pace, and I am the Outdoor Programs Manager for Girl Scouts of South Carolina, and you will be meeting a special guest in just a minute. Okay. To get us started, we're going to start with the promise and the law. So if you want to follow along with me, raise your fingers. On my honor, I will try to serve God and my country, to help people at all times, and to live by the Girl Scout law. The Girl Scout law. I will do my best to be honest and fair, friendly and helpful, considerate and caring, courageous and strong, responsible for what I say and do, and to respect myself and others, respect authority, use resources wisely, make the world a better place, and be a sister to every Girl Scout. Thank you for following along. Today, we're doing the photographer part one, and the steps of the badge are as follows. Step one, explore the power of photography. Step two, focus on composition, shoot 5 landscapes. Step 3, focus on light, shoot 5 portraits or still lifes. Step 4, focus on motion, shoot 5 action shots. And step 5, tell the story with photography. So the purpose of the badge, when we've completed and earned this badge, we will know how to capture, well, it's our vision of the world in photographs. Okay. Today's activities, we're going to do step 1, step 2, step 3, and step 4. So we're going to get started with those now. We're very excited. So our special guest today is Edward Pace of Edward Pace Photography, and he's going to pretty much do this entire badge because he has so much experience. So we're going to hand it over to him. And are you unmuted, Mr. Ed?
Yes, I am.
Awesome. Well, take it away.
Good morning, all Girl Scouts. And Debbie and Keegan, I guess, are our participants today. Once again, my name is Edward Pace, and I have been a Girl Scout dad for the past 18 years. I have also done photography for about 40 years now. Ever since I was in the 5th grade, I loved taking pictures, just like you, Keegan. I love dogs, and dogs love me, and I think my first passion is actually ice cream, but I digress. We're going to learn a little bit about composition. We're going to learn about shutter speeds, the relationship between ISO, aperture, and such. First, history. And next slide. There you go. Okay, history can actually date back to 500 years BC, which were pictographs, which are photos. They had to be hand-drawn. But the first recorded photograph is on the left. That was taken by Nepis, and that was in about 1825 to 1827. Nobody's really quite sure. And if you look at the lower right-hand corner of that, you'll see one lone guy getting his shoes shined. And he was the only guy that stood long enough to have his picture taken. It is a very busy street in France, but because it was so slow, the film was so slow, that picture had to remain open for 8 hours to record it. So you'll see sunshine on both sides of the buildings. Then we progress a little bit to plates, where they would take a silver halide solution and coat a plate. Each plate had to be loaded in the camera, and then the picture on the right was the photographer. And this is in the 1800s, 1850 or so. And maybe you've heard of Matthew Brady. He was a very famous Civil War photographer about 1865. And they had to take each camera back into the wagon, unload it, process it right there. Next slide. Then we got the portable camera. This is a speed Graflex used to a lot in the 1930s, 1940s, really popular in the 1950s. You see a lot of that in the Korean War and World War II. And if you can see me real quick, Lauren,
Yes.
can they see me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. This holder right here is what would go into that camera, although slightly larger. And you could load 2 pieces of film into this holder, use one, take it out, turn it over, and use the other one. Then you had to put this in your pocket and get a new one out. So you were only limited to 2 shots every time you had to change the film out. Go ahead. Back to the PowerPoint real quick.
You're good.
And then we get into motion pictures. Now, motion picture film was done on plastic or acetate. Acetate, of course, is very flammable and would burn very fast. It had a lot of nitrates in it. So they switched over to a plastic-based format. Next slide. And that's your plastic-based 35 millimeter film. Well, somebody had the great idea of, hey, if we can take movies on this, why don't we just turn it sideways and make it into stills? That way we don't have to carry around the slides with us. Next. So we get into what are known as 35 millimeter cameras. Now this one, if you see the top there, you look through the top and then the little hole right above where it says Exacta, that's where you would look out of, not through the lens at this point. So this would be a rangefinder or waist finder camera. Next. And then we get into the modern day 35 millimeter cameras, which were really popular 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And if you'll come back to me real quick, Lauren.
Cool.
Oh yeah, and that takes that kind of film. It takes a rolled 35 millimeter film.
You're on Spotlight.
Oh, great. This camera right over here, this is a bellows camera. It's a Kodak camera, and it was popular in about the 1920s. I didn't include that in the slides only because it is a little confusing. The timeline, it has a larger film base, and I didn't have one to show you. So I only have the cameras. This is a stereo camera. It takes 2 pictures at once. If you've ever seen any of those old pictures of the Victorian people holding the little slide up to their face and you're seeing 2 pictures and it looks stereo, that's what that would be taken with. Okay, back to the PowerPoint.
Debbie mentioned that many print shops can't process these or disposable cameras anymore.
That is true. There are a few shops. I have some film like that, some 35 millimeter film that I haven't developed in years. I did find a place online that I can send that, but is what they do is they don't do it right away. They wait months, 2 months, 3 months, and they get all these rolls from all over the country and do them all at one time. So if I was to send a roll out, you know, you used to get next day processing and prints. Well, now it could take up to 90 days, but there are shops that can do it.
Awesome. That was a great fact. Thank you, Debbie. All right.
And then we get into the modern day DSLR, as we know it, digital single lens reflex camera. My choice is Canon. I've been using Canon since I was a very, very young man. They're all tools. They're all like hammers. You can all use them very well. It doesn't matter really what brand you're using. I just happen to be brand conscious with the Canon because I know the Canon product and I've been using it for a long time. But Nikon, Pentax, Fuji, they're all very good cameras. And a lot of them take different kinds of media. Now, this particular camera can take the secure digital media, number 1 there. And it can also take number 4 down on the bottom there, the compact flash. Other cameras take other kinds of media, and they're all the same. Some of them are bigger than others. Some of them are faster than others, but they're all basically they do the same job. Little known fact is we did have the first digital camera in 1975. All the way back in 1975, we had a digital camera. It weighed 8 pounds, and 8 pounds is about a jug of water, a gallon jug of water. That's how heavy this thing was to carry around. And it would do maybe 15 pictures, and then they had to download them someplace. It had an internal hard drive, so you couldn't take the media out of it. You had to take the camera in, you had to plug it in and download it and clear it. Then you can go back out and take pictures. So it wasn't very user friendly. Next slide. Doesn't matter what kind of camera you're using, you're going to have a focusing screen. And these are different types. There's split, there's fuzzy ones, there's ones with little dots, whatever yours might be. You can change focusing screens in a lot of different kinds of cameras. Back to me, Lauren, real quick.
Good.
This particular camera up here is a DSLR. It's a Canon. You can change the focusing screens in this one to suit you. If you're a sports photographer, or you do more portraits or what have you, there are different kinds of screens, different than what you see on your screen right now, but they basically do all the same job. Some of them just make it easier for composition or what have you. Next slide.
This is where you talk about your cameras.
Oh, my cameras. These here. Well, my cameras, basically I use a DSLR now. I do carry around several lenses with me, flash units. You're not going to believe this, but I have 7 of them. I also have external batteries for those because I do a lot of real estate photography, or did a lot of real estate photography when the market was good. I would take these out and attach them to stands and put them around the house so I could shoot very quickly, moving from room to room. The batteries would waste very fast. 6 batteries go pretty fast, so I made some external batteries for myself. I do have 7 flashes. I have studio lights, which you can't see now, which are right here. They are high-powered lights. They broadcast daylight, so you see me very well. I also have other studio lights for shooting things like little jars or car transmissions or whatever it is for that day. I have studio lights for that. So a lot of different kinds of lights and several tripods. You can't see this tripod very well, but it is a very good tripod. It's a heavy tripod. Most people don't need one that heavy. You can get by with a light duty tripod.
Okay.
Yes. Where's that next slide? Okay. Some of the basics are you're focusing. Are you going to focus manually or by auto? Now, as I've grown older, I need glasses, and I really like my autofocus now. I gave up photography for just a little while because manual focus was difficult for me, and there was no solutions. Now there's solutions. We have manual or autofocus. I usually use manual focus when I'm shooting a product because I can get in there. It's slow. I can take my time. I can get it exactly right. Autofocus, I'm going to have to use autofocus when I'm shooting sports. That's a whole different animal. There are 3 things that are going to make a good photograph: aperture, exposure, and shutter speed. Oh, that's good. Right now you're seeing the manual selection. This is a focusing grid of my camera. In particular, yours may vary, where I can select where I want my focus to be. Now, you can light up all those little buttons and get an average, or you can select each one and get what area you want of selected focus. A lot of times, I just use the one in the middle. I will focus on a subject, say a portrait. I'm going to focus right on your eyes. And then I'm going to move the camera, after I get the button held down, I'm going to move the camera to how I want it composed in the camera, and that's going to stay focused on your eyes or your nose. On the very bottom there, real quick, you're going to see ISO stands for International Standards Organization. Used to be called ASA when we did film. It was American Standards Association, but we changed it to international now. And as all that is it's a measure, just like a measuring cup. A measuring cup, no matter where you go, 1 cup is 1 cup, 2 cups is 2 cups. Just like International Standards Organization has labeled your shutter speed. 100 is 100, 500 is 500. So that's all that is. So you just boil it down to something you can't understand. I put a little triangle up here of the old how fire starts, because everybody has seen this in school, I think. You have to have oxygen, you have to have an ignition source, and you have to have fuel in order to make a fire. The next slide. Same thing goes for your pictures. You have to have three good things to make a perfect picture. You have to have aperture. Aperture is described as the amount of light that is entering the camera lens. The lower the number, the lower the amount of light. The higher the number, the more light. So you have to have that. You have to have your shutter speed, which is going to basically be how long that shutter is open. And then it's combined with ISO. Those three factors put together are going to make your photograph really nice. If your aperture is too small, it's going to be too dark. Your shutter speed is too slow, it's going to be blurry. So you get those three in combination. A lot of people use the manual. I use manual when I'm shooting because I like the creative edge of picking how light or dark, how saturated I want that colors to be. You can also use a auto setting. It's great using auto setting in some instances when you just don't have time to do the calculations in your head. There are other buttons on your camera such as portrait, sports, landscape. I don't use those buttons at all. I just find them cumbersome, and I like to do the thinking on that. Next slide. And there was no provision in the basics today to talk about this, so I wanted to throw it in. Many of you have heard of Photoshop. Many of you might have heard of Lightroom. All photographs coming out of a digital camera must be edited. They have to be edited and cropped so they give a nice composition. The colors need to be changed a little bit. So a lot of people use Photoshop or Lightroom, which are excellent programs, but they're a little bit expensive. And as everyone knows, I'm a cheap guy. I like cheap stuff. And darktable.org is a free resource. You go there, you can download that Darktable program to your computer, and it will operate just like Lightroom, and it's absolutely free. And then there's an online web-based product called Photopea, which is also absolutely free. This one you can use on your tablet or your phone because it's web-based, although on a phone would be very cumbersome. A tablet is difficult, so your home computer would be better for that. Both of these programs are very good. The Darktable course is a lot better, but they're free. You don't have to spend upwards of $1,000 a year for a subscription to Adobe, which I love Adobe products, but sometimes you just got to cut corners. Okay, next slide. Okay, talking about composition real quick. Landscapes. Landscapes are usually done horizontally. And when I talk about horizontal, it's the long edges, just like this. So it's a long picture, not a straight up and down picture. Most portraits are up and down, but the rules can be broken. So in this slide, you're seeing the leading lines and you're seeing a horizontal composition. Notice that the clouds in this picture really give it a dramatic effect. If the sky was clear, sure, it might look good, but this really gives it a ominous and more foreboding look to it. I think in this picture, though, that I would have lightened the grass a little bit just to make it pop. Next slide. Okay, so this one was done, and this is done in a portrait style landscape. And the reason they did it this way is to accentuate the wood sticking out of the water, what looks like used to be an old dock, boat dock or what have you. So they did it, it's more in a black and white or bluish, gives it kind of a gloomy look to it, maybe a wintry feel. But they've done this portrait style to make those leading lines look even more accentuated. Now your framing is very important. The better you frame in the camera, the less time you're going to spend editing behind the screen. Leading lines, of course, and let me just say real quick that I do not shoot anything on railroad tracks, and we should avoid railroad tracks because people get killed that way. It's a big controversy because we see a lot of bands, a lot of student senior pictures being shot on railroad tracks. It's just a bad idea. I personally don't do it. Leading lines. You see the leading lines in this one are much like the other one. It takes your eye to a place. It's telling a story. And in this case, it's telling me to look from the shore to the mountains. Tips and tricks for these kind of photography is the golden hour. And the golden hour is a half hour before sunrise. You're going to get beautiful sunrises. A half hour before sunset. That's the golden hour, half hour to half hour. These are the optimum times to take your pictures, not in the middle of the day when the sun is over your head. If you've ever noticed a picture of somebody at noon, 11 o'clock, standing someplace, look at under their nose, look right under their nose at their lip. You're going to see a shadow under there, and you're going to see shadows under the eyes. The reason for that is the high noon sun casts a very deep shadows under those areas, so you want to shoot at different times of the day. For landscapes, something you can't do without is a tripod. And I talked about a tripod earlier. This tripod and head that you saw earlier in my little display here, this was a very expensive tripod. It was a little over $400. The head on it was a little over $400. It's about a $800-900 tripod. I picked it up in a pawn shop for 80 bucks. And a lot of times they don't know what they have. And I'm a cheap guy, so I look for these kind of things, and I buy them when I can get them. You don't have to go that route. You can go to Amazon.com, which I did last night. I did a little research. You can get a tripod, a very good one, for $25 or less. And it's going to be a little more light duty than this one. It's a little heavy duty. It's probably, I'm going to guess this tripod weighs about 9 pounds. So if you're traveling, you're not going to want to carry that one around. But when you're shooting landscapes, maybe it's a little windy out there. Here's another tip for you. People buy sandbags. And I don't understand this because they're expensive for what you get. You get a bag and you fill it with sand, and that's your sandbag. Don't do that. Stop by the supermarket, pick yourself up a water jug, a gallon water jug. That weighs 7 pounds. Put a rope around it and tie it to the bottom of your tripod and let it dangle below the legs, and that'll give you a nice secure base. So if it's a little bit windy, you won't get camera shake. A timer. A lot of cameras have self-timers in them for taking selfies or taking group pictures that you want to be in, and you have modes of 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, whatever it is. When you're shooting a landscape, even though you're not in the picture, set that timer with your camera on a tripod, and then you don't touch it. Because a lot of times you get enough vibration from your finger touching the trigger that you're going to move that camera. So use that timer, let it do its thing all on its own. You're going to want to use maximum aperture, and that would be like an f22, f32, f16, whatever your camera will allow you to do. Use maximum aperture to get the maximum depth of field. So you're going to be in focus from what we're looking at right now is the first post all the way to the mountains. If you use f2, f3.5, what have you, your depth of field is going to be a little more accordion. Okay, if you push an accordion together, what you're going to get is the middle of the accordion, not the outer edges. So you're going to want to use maximum aperture. And finally, cumulus or clouds. You want to try for a time of day when there's clouds. And if you get moving clouds, of course, you're going to have to shoot a little faster. But if you have stationary clouds, it adds a little effect to your photograph. Next slide. Okay, now panoramics. When you're shooting panoramics, a lot of times in camera, if you're using a cell phone, cell phones are good about this. They have a panoramic mode that will stitch them together for you. So imagine if you had a paper photograph in your hand and you had to glue it together, stitch it together. You would want to overlap a little bit. So we're looking at the graph here. You're looking at the picture. You're going to have picture 1 is overlapping picture 2. 2 is overlapping 3. It all depends on how your skills are. I usually pick a point on the right-hand side when I'm doing a panogram or a panoramic. I pick a point on the right-hand side, a window or whatever. I overlap it a little bit, probably not as much as they did here. Now, with the curvature of the earth and the way your tripod is, though, it's not going to come out straight, just like you see here. They've simplified this. It's going to come out more on a curve, and if you have not overlapped enough or maybe too much, it's going to look curvy when you put it all together in Lightroom or Photoshop. Those two programs have a stitcher that you pick 4 or 5 photographs and say stitch together, and it does it for you. I'm not really sure about Darktable. I've never used that feature on this. I'm not sure if that is in there, but it's really good, so you don't have to line them up yourself. Composition. Let's talk about the rule of thirds real quick. The rule of thirds, you split a photograph into 3 parts horizontally and 3 parts vertically. And as you can see here, the little girl's head is on one of the intersecting lines. And it tells a story, because now if you just shot that little girl right in the center, it's really not going to be that interesting of a picture. As a matter of fact, if you hold your hand up on the screen right now on the right-hand side and take away some of that, you'll see that it's not quite as interesting if you crop too far in. This gives a little bit of a leading line, if you will. It gives you a little more on the sides so that you can see a little story going on there. Where was she running? If you held your hand up to the right of the picture, you say, where's she running? Is she in the front yard, or where's he? Now this tells you, oh, she's in a grassy field or a cow pasture or something cool like that. Next photo.
Oh, here is our options. So we have a little bit of homework for this badge, and so that's why we have a part 2. So I'm gonna go over the homework, and then we'll jump back into step 3. So our homework options, you can take a day in the life, landscape, take landscape pictures 5 times a day, the same spot, so early morning, late morning, lunch, afternoon, and dark. So you can take it, say, outside of your bedroom, or your back porch, and maybe you have a favorite tree. You want to take those at 5 different times of the day, and it's going to give us a story. You can also take pictures of weather patterns, so before the storm, during the storm, and after, but please be careful. Of course, don't go outside, take it from the window. And that's also going to tell a story. Then the last option, you can take a different vantage point. So you take 5 different angles of the same view. So it might be, like I said, your favorite tree, but you're going to take it from the far left, the far right, a kind of back away, or very close, so that you're capturing different elements. And with this homework, next week we're going to be talking and discussing our photos. So if you do finish your homework and you want to send us the photos so we can talk about them, you can do that, and I'm going to attach the email after the program, and we can then, part 2, we can talk about the photos, and we can examine the story that you're trying to tell. So that's homework number 1. Okay. All right, Mr. Ed, step 3.
All right. Step 3. Let me go back to step 2 real quick, talk about just a few things. You want to take a lot of bad photographs. You don't have to go back, Lauren. That's okay. I just want a couple quick things. You want to take a lot of bad photographs, because that's the only way you're going to get good is to take more bad photographs. And only keep your best work. Throw the rest away. Don't worry about the rest. There's too much space on hard drives taken up by bad photographs. Just throw them away. You take 5 pictures of the same person, pick the best one, throw the rest away. It's very hard when you're a parent, however, to throw pictures away of your children. Oh, it just hurts when you do that, but you got to do it. Also, when you're shooting something, think of it as a project, like you're going to make a book. Okay, I am going to make a tabletop book that somebody's going to enjoy. And when you put it in that aspect, you're only going to take your best photos at that point. Okay, on to step number 3, landscape or portrait. What are you going to do? You're going to do up and down or left and right. So maybe get out of your comfort zone a little bit. A lot of people just take horizontals. So get out of your comfort zone and shoot a whole day of nothing but vertical photos, just to get kind of comfortable with that. Leading lines, pick things with leading lines. Pick, like I went to a grocery store once and photographed just the produce aisle and the leading lines of the way they had stacked all the fruit. That was a very good photograph I love. Light versus shadow. Flash, natural light, flash outdoors, and a light source that you create. So we're going to go backwards on this one just because I like the light source you create. You can create different light sources such as filtering through a window or candlelight or Christmas lights. Kick it slightly out of focus and you're going to get what's called bokeh. So it's a nice light source. And when you're dealing with light coming through a window, by the way, and you want to break it up a little bit because there's no shadows, take a piece of cardboard, 3 feet by 2 feet, and just cut pieces out of it, squares, triangles, whatever, and hold it up to the light, and that's going to give broken shadows all over things. It makes it very interesting that way. Using flash outdoors. I use flash outdoors a lot because you're going to want to fill in shadows, little shadows under people's necks, under their nose, maybe a shiny forehead. You can do a lot of things. Thank you, Lauren. This is a stock photograph of different kinds of lighting. You'll see the top left picture where the light source is on the left hand, so the person's right hand side, giving a shadow on the left. Same with number 2. They just did it a little darker to get it a little deeper. The square number 3, she's cocked her head slightly to give a completely dark on one side. And then you see a almost front on, but with that front on one, I can tell in the back, they have a light source in the back shining on the background to break up her from the background itself. And then finally, the big picture on the right has a style of lighting where it's just slightly, maybe 3/4, you're going to get a little more light. And you can do that with one light source. You can do that with a light bulb even. Put the light on the right-hand side of the girl, and then go to the dollar store at some point and pick up some of those boards with the foam in the middle of them. They're $1 a piece, black and white. Don't get the color ones unless you want to throw some color in there. But I use those a lot. They're cheap. They're $1, and you stand on the opposite side of the light source, and you can turn that board just a little bit, and you're going to be able to fill in those areas that you want to fill in. So if you look above her cheek on that picture there, you see that she's got a little light there. Well, the light wasn't coming from that area, but somebody filled it in with a card. So you don't have to buy a real expensive thing that you see on Amazon or whatever. Just first go to the dollar store, get a $1 piece of board, and you can just angle it in there with the board to your liking. Okay, so natural light, of course, would be outdoor light, and flash would be the flash on camera. Now, a lot of people use flash on camera. Lauren, can you come back to me real quick?
Yep. Okay.
Okay, the flash on camera, you're going to get a flash. Let me take this thing off here. You're going to get a flash like this. This is a straight-on flash. You're going to get the red eyes. You're going to get flash. It almost looks like you're just throwing light at people because there's just so much. That's why I use this. It's a little cap that goes on here. It's a diffuser. This little piece of plastic probably cost me about $8, and I felt horrible when I bought it. But you can use other things for flash diffuser, like, say, the top of a Cool Whip container that's almost translucent. Piece of Tupperware will work. You can also take a milk carton and cut a hole in a milk carton and stick it on the front of the flash, and that's going to diffuse the light around the room. It's going to scatter more light for you. So I use this almost exclusively on here because it's going to scatter light. Now, sometimes I don't want a direct looking light. I don't want light to just pummel people, like you're hitting them with a bat. So I'm going to tip this flash up just a little bit. I'm going to hit the ceiling. This is very important to have when you're buying a flash. Make sure you get one that can move around. This one can move many different directions. It can move actually all the way. You can spin this one all the way around and shoot the flash behind me. So if I have a color ceiling, I don't want the color cast, but the wall is white, I can shoot behind me, and the wall being white will come down back on the people just like that. Okay, so that would be a source of diffused light. Back to natural light and flash and indoor light. Light bulbs, flash, and natural light are all different color temperatures. Color temperature is very long and drawn out, so I'm not going to get into a lot of it. But there are settings on your camera for using flash, for using outdoor light, and for using just indoors. It's because those are going to give a different color cast. Have you ever seen a picture such as the one I'm in right now versus one that has orange in it. That orange is going to be a tungsten light bulb. So digital cameras nowadays can compensate for that, whereas they couldn't years ago. Next slide.
So,
I'm
Mr.
sorry, there's one more. Tips and tricks. I forgot tips and tricks. Always focus on the eyes. Yes, yes.
We are going to skip your video because we're running out of time, but it'll be attached later, so you can view it later.
Okay. Hey, ladies, watch that video. It's a good video. It's short. There are many resources on YouTube. If you wish to have a list of these resources and ones that I like to go to, please contact Lauren and I will send her a list. She can send it out to you. All right, next slide.
Tips and tricks, eyes.
Yes. Oh, tips and tricks real quick. Always focus on the eyes. Stay on the eyes. Even if you're going to, like I do, I focus on the eyes. I hold my button down to keep my focus, and then I move a little bit to get my composition. Pardon me, I stutter a little sometimes. Take lots of photos. Overkill. Take lots and lots of photos, and then you can weed out the bad ones because, you know, somebody's going to blink their eyes or the background's not going to be quite right. You got to make sure that you're watching what's going on in your background. And you can change your background. Like you got somebody in the back of your photo and they're just not moving and they're making it look bad. Just shift your feet a little bit. Move around just a bit to the right or to the left. Get around that person. Like I said before, make a list of projects or books that you want to do. Not that you're actually doing a book, but you have projects, a project list. I'm working on several project lists right now. A couple of them I don't want to talk about because maybe someday it'll be a book, who knows. But my next one is fence posts. And it is weathered, old fence posts because they have a lot of character to them. They have weather. There's a lot of nice lines in them. They're darks and lights, splinters, all kinds of good stuff. So my next project is probably getting in really, really tight and close on those patterns of wood. Remember the little details behind the photo we talked about. Okay.
All right, so your homework for this is to invite your family to a shoot day. Set up a fun location, wardrobe, and props. Play around with the placement of people, objects, and light in 5 shots. You can also choose to capture the same person or object from 5 different perspectives. Play around with the light, distance, zoom, and angles. Experiment with posed and candid shots. Your other option is grow your image. Start small and photograph one person or item and then add more. See how light affects shadows, shapes, and textures and colors. And once again, if you want to be featured on the photography part 2, where we talk about our photos, you're going to have an email so that you can send those in so that we can see your photos. All right, step 4, Mr. Ed.
Okay, when shooting action shots, there's several different ways you can do it. Number one, you set your shutter speed very high, say 500 or 1,000, and you shoot. Well, what are you going to get? You're going to get a photograph of, and I had one of a dog on a beach that's not here, but it's a beach, it's a dog, and the dog is jumping. Well, that's all you see. It doesn't convey any kind of motion. You just see a jump with nothing in it. Looking at this picture, though, here's a guy on a cyclist, or a guy on a bicycle, and the photographer has found his subject and moved with the subject and then taken the picture. The shutter speed was probably a little lower in this one, and the reason being is it blurred the background nicely. Maybe not high enough to make him stop completely. You could stop him completely, which would be cool, but this, you can see where the wheels have a little bit of flare to them, or a little bit of blur that conveys motion. It makes it a little more interesting and action. This is cropped very tightly, probably for a magazine or a web page. If you were doing a print for a book, you would crop it not so tight so that you would have more of a leading edge on the left-hand side to show those leading lines and composition, okay? Next frame. And here's a different kind of blur. This is where you stand completely still. You take your shutter speed and make your shutter speed low. And then as the truck's going by, you take the picture, and what's happening is the truck is actually dragging itself across the film plane, making itself blurry. So the two different kinds of blur: an action blur where you want to see the person, and then another one where you don't, in this case, you don't want to see it. And what this is telling me, and if you're looking at this photograph, is really great because you have your composition, you also have your leading lines. You see where the wood pieces are for the railing, and then it's around that tunnel. What this photograph is telling me is they're trying to tell a story about truckers maybe hauling goods, or maybe truckers are going too fast. So it's telling that kind of story. We don't, in this case, we don't want to put the finger on this guy and get him fired for our magazine article. But what we're doing is we are showing he's going too fast, but we can't really tell who it is. But we know where the bridge is, right? The tunnel. Now it'd be tunnel number 3, I think. But okay, so there you see it's got the composition, it's got the framing, it's got the leading lines, it's well exposed, and it tells a story all in the same photograph.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right.
Oh,
so,
wait, I'm sorry, about action shots also, something I found, I have shot a lot of motocross, I've shot a lot of car things. One thing you want to do is, where you see all the people and they're all gaggled together in one area, because that's a great place to shoot a photograph. Don't go there, because that's where everybody else goes and your shot's going to look like everybody else's. What I like to do, like go to a motocross track, I will walk around the entire track if possible, and I will pick a different spot that nobody else is at, because that's going to give me a different photograph. I don't want to be the same as everybody else. I want mine to be different. And when you're shooting action shots, you see people standing and they got their camera to their face and they're shooting a picture. I get down on my knees, I sit down, I get a little closer to the action. This is going to give a whole different feel. In fact, you should try this as soon as we get off. Go take a picture in your yard, standing up, and then go sit down and take a picture and see how dramatic it is. Or take a picture of your dog or your car and then sit down. You'll see how it changes it completely. Okay, there you go.
Awesome. And you sometimes see photographers laying down too.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, so your homework option for action shots are: take photos of a group or individual in motion. This can be in 5 stages of motion or one scene in 5 shots. So just like we were talking about with the bicycle or with the truck, it can be, focused on either motion. Take photos of faces in motion, either 5 faces in one motion, so all of them smiling, or 1 face in 5 motions, so smiling in 5 parts, okay? So take photos of objects in motion. Shoot 5 different objects in motion, or I guess I didn't finish the sentence, or 1 object in 5 different motions, okay? I didn't finish that sentence, I'm so sorry. All right. So today, that is all we have for today, but let's talk about next week. Mr. Ed is going to be back, and we would love to see your photos from homework. So we're going to be critiquing, and critiquing doesn't necessarily mean we're going to say negative things. We're going to talk about good things, things we can do better, things that maybe we didn't think about. I know Mr. Ed has a lot of tips and tricks, and so if he sees something, he can say, well, next time you could add this, and that's not a negative, it's going to be a positive. So we would love to see your photographs. Like I said before, I'm going to be sending out an email with the ability for you guys to email me back, just reply, and we would love to see 1 or 5 or 25 of your photos, and we will feature them next week at 11 o'clock on Photographer Part 2. And then from there, you'll be able to complete step 5 on your own, and we'll talk about that next week. And then after next week, you will have earned this badge. So we're very excited that you guys joined us today. We hope you had a lot of ideas in your head, and we hope to see you next week. Thank you, Mr. Ed, for coming and speaking about photography, and we will see you next week.
Thank you.
Awesome.
All right, I have 2 final thoughts real quick.
Okay.
If I may?
Yes.
Okay, number 1, all the photographs we use today are somebody else's. None of those are mine. And they are copywritten. And these people like to get paid for their photographs, and they like their copywritten stuff to be acknowledged. Under this use, though, we are a nonprofit. We are teaching a free class, and this is under the fair use doctrine of copyright, meaning that as long as it's for educational purposes or learning, teaching, we can go ahead and use their photograph without compensation. So always respect people's copyright on these kind of items. Item number 2 for me, if I don't, my computer died and I could not give you any of my own photographs. So if you want to see anything that I have, you can go to edpacephoto.com, click on the gallery, and you can see a couple of examples there. Okay?
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And Mr. Ed, if you'd stay on the line, just one second. But everybody else, thank you, and we will see you next week. And hopefully, we will get to see your photos. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's stop share.
Sorry, I'm a little long-winded.
Oh no, you're totally fine. I'm just gonna do something real quick.
Okay.
Uh-oh. Okay, real quick. All right. I don't know why this isn't so. Oh, it's your thing. Okay. All right.